aggression is misunderstood. I think that a lot of children have a lot of aggression, and it's completely natural. And we really do a poor job of addressing aggression. It's usually addressed with some sort of judgment or shame or sort of cognitive explanation about why you shouldn't have it. But they've got it, and you got to deal with it. And for me, it's more about I think aggression in a child needs to be met with compassionate aggression.
Life is all about relationships. Lovers, family, body, or money. How satisfied you are can be completely explained by how you relate to things around you. This is Sophie Jaffe, and together with my husband, Dr. D. Jaffe, we are here to explore and teach you how to maximize your relationships and achieve a happier life. Let's get ignited.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Ignited Relationship Podcast. I'm Adi Jaffe, and no, Sophie's not here. Sophie had to jet, literally. We were just done with an interview, and she had to bounce, and so I'm covering for her, which is always nice because she covers for me so much that I'm glad I get to step in and do the same. And I just mean that in life, by the way, in general. So thank you, Sophie. Today is one of our bullying episodes, if you've been following up on this month. And I've loved the conversations we've gotten into this entire month. And just wait until you hear where it goes this month. You're going to lose your shit. Maybe you'll lose your shit. So maybe listen on the toilet. I don't know where I just went with that. It's all good. This conversation today is a little personal, which it was also with Jody when we talked to her. And because Sophie and I have dealt with bullying in the way we didn't think we had to ever before. You know, when I was a kid, I became a bully's bully. Like, I found kids who took advantage of other kids, and then I made it my point to figure out a way to get them to stop. And normally that wasn't necessarily the nicest thing, like alienating them and getting them to not be comfortable in their own surroundings. And part of that was because I was being protective of the people around me. I didn't really understand much about the bullies themselves. And I'm getting to learn a lot more about that, A, by having a boy who is incredibly physical and incredibly independent, and B, through these conversations that we've had. So I'm going to get you to the interview today with Joe here really, really quickly, but I want to walk us through a little bit of the theme, and I'll start with the review of the week, this time from Celia Cohn Gjep. Sometimes I wonder where the names come from, if that's like her username on her phone. But if you want to let me know, you can always DM me personally. I'd love the story behind it. Here's the review. I love this podcast. The topics are always on point and relatable. The honesty and vulnerability Sophie and Adi bring to each other and to us listeners in each episode is both amazing and inspiring. I've made it part of my morning ritual and highly recommend it to anyone who wants to set their day off in a positive way. Well, thank you for that, Celia. We tried, man. It's not always easy to be this transparent, but we love the impact. So thank you so much for taking the time to not only leave a rating, but also a review. And for those of you who love us, do the same. Maybe we'll read it here. Celia, if you want to screenshot this and share it with us, we would love it as well. In the end, it's all about impact, right? The reason we go through the work, the reason we pay the money, the reason we book the guests and bring them in is so that you guys can have impact. And this conversation with Joe here today is exactly one of those conversations. Joe Newman wrote a book called Raising Lions, which Sophie got to help us with some of the challenges we're having in parenting. And then she loved talking to him through the book, like seeing his viewpoint so much that she just went out and saw where he was at. He's in our backyard, not literally, he doesn't like live in our backyard, but lives close by. And so we decided to bring him in, and this conversation was really, really powerful. And here's a quote from Joe that I really loved. It's, conflict is going to happen throughout your lifetime. That's why for me, that's the place for the deepest psychological learning. Self-confident, independent thinking, resistance to addiction, self-discipline is all formed in those moments. And, you know, that's a quote from Joe about kids and conflict, primarily kids with ADHD and learning disabilities and things like that, which is a specialty. But if you've been listening to our podcast for a while, it's also what we say about all relationships, right? Instead of running away from moments of conflict, recognizing that they're going to be there and then using them as opportunities to learn, is the way to move forward in all relationships. And so, we're always learning. I don't remember who just said this to me over the last couple of days, but either in an interview that I was doing or a talk that I was giving, somebody came up to me after and said, I see it as my job to always be a student. I can be an expert and I can teach other people, but I also always need to be a student. And there's nothing that's taught me that as much as parenting, because no matter what you think your kids will challenge you at some point. No matter what you know how to do, no matter what you know how to handle, no matter what you do about your scheduling or career, what you love eating or what you like doing for recreation. Once kids come into the equation, a lot of that is going to get jostled and shaken about. And so many of us don't get so uncomfortable with conflict because we didn't grow up knowing how to handle it. Nobody taught us how to do it. That understanding how to use it as a learning opportunity, to me, is one of the biggest tools that we can have. And so, when we talk about bullying, it can be important. Like I said, I used to always focus on the bullied and try to protect them. But how nice would it be to actually understand why the bullying is happening so that we can stop it at the source? Because that would also protect not only all the people who are being bullied, it would actually protect the bully themselves. Because I don't believe anybody bullies because they really want to hurt others. I think typically it's this really terribly maladaptive attempt at exerting your own control because you feel out of it. And if you need to look for our president right now for any proof of that, feel free to just open any newspaper or turn on the TV or look on the news, because I don't know what is happening today, but I guarantee there's some of that happening right now in our world. And so I'm going to let Joe come on here, first of all, because that means Sophie gets to join me again here really quickly. And I want you to listen and pay attention to this conversation, not just from the kids and how to parent perspective. Some of you are parents and dealing with this, and that's exactly how this will apply for you. But even if it doesn't, what have you gone through in your own life as a child that altered the way you now relate to others, altered your relationships? And what can you learn from this conversation of how appropriate parenting would have happened to put you in a different mindset that would have resolved in many, many different decisions later on in life? So I hope you love this. I'm loving this month of episodes, and Joe just brought so much wisdom, including some real tips for your parents. So check it out on the other side. We've got a special announcement for all of you today. Stop what you're doing. Unless you're on the road, do not stop in the middle of the road. We are giving away 3 tickets to our Glow event. If you're listening right now, 3 tickets, that's like $3,000 worth of tickets to the Glow event in LA. If you listen to this podcast and you love it as much as we do, you're going to meet in person a bunch of the guests that we've had here. We're going to have some special extra things for the people who win these. Now, to enter this contest, you got to listen up. You got to go to our latest post and you got to comment and tag the 2 people you would bring. Now, you could bring your 2 best friends if you want. You can make it awkward. You can bring 2 exes. You can bring your mom and dad. You can bring anybody you want as long as you're limited to 2 people. So if you only have 2 friends, this is not a thing to worry about. You can just bring both of them along. We're going to choose a winner at random, but bonus points for those of you who really explain while you're tagging those people why it is you can't wait to come to this thing. Can't wait to see you there. Glow is going to be redunculous. Get ready for the interview.
This episode of the Ignited podcast is brought to you by Philosophy Superfoods. The Philosophy offers cleanses and other nutritional products that are unlike any of the other supplements and detoxification programs on the market. Why? Because they actually nourish the body with whole, live, nutrient-rich foods instead of depriving you and leaving you hungry. Have you ever tried a cleanse only to find out that you can't make it through a whole day because you're starving? Ever try a superfood shake that made you nauseous because it was so disgusting you'd rather not eat? The Philosophy fixes all that with a simple set of offerings that load up your body with nutrients while actually tasting good. Makes sense, right? Each of the Philosophy superfood and protein blends is vegan, raw, gluten-free, and has absolutely no filler ingredients. With over 15,000 satisfied customers, including some of the world's biggest celebrities like George Clooney, Gerard Butler, Lea Michele, and over 10 years of experience, this is the best stuff you can get. To buy some or find out more info, go to our website, thephilosophy.com.
All right, everybody, welcome back to our conversation part of this podcast. We've got Joe Newman with us here today. And before I let you talk, Joe, I want Sophie to tell us the story of how she even learned about you, because I think that's how you ended up sitting here.
Yes. So welcome. So happy to have you. I have been struggling for the past, I want to say since like halfway through my pregnancy with my baby. So about 2.5 years now with our middle child, Leo.
Right.
He is a wild child. We talk about a lot on here. And
a lion.
And he's a lion.
Nice.
And a Leo in astrology and tried and true. And I've just been picking up different books, trying different techniques, you know, all types of jiu-jitsu, like what can we do?
Right.
And approaching it with the most love possible. And I went to our Waldorf school library. It's really small because it's only till 3rd grade at this campus. And I went to the parent resource section, and your book, Raising Lions, for some reason, I may have heard from someone else or seen it, but I just intuitively felt drawn to it, and I just took it with me. And then I started reading it and totally resonated. And then I shared with my Instagram following, just like, man, this kid like took a picture of Leo, and I'm reading this book right now, and it's just so comforting and nice to read. I was only on like the first chapter. And I had a really great response from my following. They were really interested, like keep me updated. Some people immediately were like, I bought it. And then other people were like, let me know as it unfolds. Let me know your technique, like what you think. So really great response. And then I was like, let me see where he is. Maybe I can like do a phone consultation. Right. And then I saw you were here, and I was like, wait, it didn't even occur to me that you could be living in the same city. So I was like, oh, can we book a consultation for my son? And then I was like, wait, we need him on our podcast. People care and people want to know. So grateful to have you here. Thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. No, I love it. I think I love a podcast. You know, I think maybe it's the ADHD kid in me. Like I always did better talking. You know, it's a break from the writing can be really tough, but just talking to people, I find like people just bring out like there's kind of a communal wisdom that happens in conversation that, you know, works.
No, absolutely. I love that you said that you do better talking. And this is a point.
Does that resonate?
I don't know. What are you trying to say?
Anyone familiar?
What are you trying to say? I was just giving a talk in Orlando, and I joke, I wasn't diagnosed with ADHD, and this is something I want to bring up. So I want Sophie to get more deeply into the conversation with you about your theories and the practice and all that. But I was up speaking, and I wasn't diagnosed with ADHD until college. But I was the kid who was told by teachers not to come back to class because I talked all the time. Right. So I did really well in school, which is why I wasn't diagnosed with ADHD, because in the 70s and 80s, the idea was you had to be a poor performer in school, right? At least in Israel, to be diagnosed. So the psychiatrist told my mom, well, he can't have ADHD, he's getting A's. So, but the teachers didn't know what to do with me because I kept talking. And so they would say, leave class, go play, do whatever you want, come back when it's time for the test or the quiz, and we're fine. And I did that for years, like in a number of classes every year.
Crazy.
Wow, I should have gone to school in Israel.
I know, right?
Well, the thing I always say, because I'm very anti-label personally. Yeah. And so the thing I say is, in some ways, I feel blessed that nobody identified it beforehand, because what would they have done to me growing up, and how would I have felt about myself growing up, knowing I had this condition? But the joke was, all the teachers kept saying when I was growing up is, you talk too much. And now my job is to talk. Right. And so, you know, this whole idea of how do you feed into the strengths? How do you build up the strengths? How do you identify what your child gravitates towards and stop trying to make them different? Because that's just going to create tension and friction and animosity in the relationship even, let alone their functioning. How do you build into those strengths is kind of a lot of what I picked up from Sophie as she was reading your book. And that's what was so exciting about bringing you on.
Yeah. You remind me a little of my wife. in terms of the talking, because they say she came out talking. Like she, like in a weird alien way, like gesticulating, at weeks old, just, and then, by 3 and 4, she was running her own talk show at the breakfast table. And so they just couldn't stop the talking. They actually would send her to the neighbors, and she would go, there were older people living in the neighborhood who just needed to talk to, and so she could just talk and talk and talk and talk. And she graduated like third to the last in her class. And then she became an improv comedian and became a very successful writer for the Drew Carey Show, toured with the Improv All-Stars all over the world, and made a whole living doing that. But it all came from she couldn't shut up.
Yep.
Yeah. And I feel like, I actually just saw this on a post because I write on my hatred to the proliferation of mental health labels that we just keep getting here.
Yeah.
And ADHD as a diagnosis just exploded in the last few decades, like exploded.
Right.
And even more so with the advent of medication for it, because we live in America, and I feel like if there's a quick fix for something, we'll try it at least.
Right.
And the way I understand it, because I didn't grow up here with ADHD, right? I came to high school, and there were a lot of other reasons why I wasn't performing well in school by that time, because I'm a foreigner, my English wasn't great, my vocabulary sucked, all that stuff. But I feel like here, a lot of parents, a lot of psychiatrists started identifying kids who just weren't acting the way we wanted them to,
right,
as having this condition.
Totally.
Yeah, and I think that there is a real dilemma for parents and for teachers, because you've got the system in front of you and you've got to work with it. And, if your kid's having trouble and they're not succeeding, I don't blame my parents for putting me on medication. It was in 1970 because they didn't know what else you could possibly do. There weren't other school options. There weren't, they didn't have tools to help build the attention span. And, it wasn't until, honestly, it was almost 30 when I started kind of shifting my own neurology consciously. Like, how do I build my attention span? And that's a lot of those tools have then grown into what I teach parents to do so they can develop attention through their interactions with children in the classroom. Like, there's a way to handle problem behavior that builds the strength of attention and impulse control in the home. You can do that all day long. We're
going to talk about those today.
And that's just so, even that is just gives people hope that we can affect our brains. We can affect our neuroplasticity. Like, there is neuroplasticity in the brain. So we can affect our attention. Like, this is the same as goes for meditation. When I first started, I can only sit for 20 seconds. And now I'm sitting for 20 minutes twice a day. There is a high chance for children and adults to affect their behavior in a positive way with attention to that thing.
Right. And whether we know it or not, we as a generation are participating in a medical experiment on the development of our minds. And this is happening through apps and technology, and all those companies are driven by a capitalist model. They want the dollars that come when they hold your attention. If they can build an addiction loop for you to have that app, for you to have a screen at all times, and they can build that as early as possible, they're going to do it. It's just the nature of capitalism. So we have to be aware. It's are we also taking control of that? Are we? How much access do we allow the internet to our children?
Sure. Or even, I think more to me is because my entire livelihood, my profession is on an app, Instagram, it's more am I going to let my conversation with myself am I going to let it run me, or am I going to run it?
Right.
It's kind of like when I'm I used to teach spin classes on bikes, and I'd say are you pushing this bike? Are you telling it where you want to go, or is it telling you? Right. Don't let it ride you. You ride it. You're in control here. Same thing goes with social media. I have a very love-hate relationship now. I'm very much in a place of gratitude. Thank goodness this is my job. Right. How lucky am I that I'm riding this wave of social media? I'm an influencer. What even is that? How is this even possible? My entire existence is because of this one little screen and this one little app. wonderful. I'll ride this wave as long as it comes, but to feel bitter towards it or to allow it to run me.
Right.
No, I don't want anything to, like, when my kids get really addicted to screens and they're like monsters about it, we're like, absolutely not. Like, the way you're acting right now, you guys are fighting over a device.
Right.
That's literally the only factor here that's bringing in tension between the two of you. We're done for the day. You guys have maxed out, And I think that's the like key for me on like a bigger picture thing is like, these are great tools.
So I'd love to hear from you, Joe, because as Sophie mentioned, one of the ways she found you was like, let's do a consultation. And we were talking about it a little bit before, and I would love to hear about your experience growing up through the medication and then what was normally kind of done,
right,
given the understanding at the time. And then the pivoting, like how did you find these other tools? What role did they serve? When did you start using them? What are they, et cetera?
Right.
And then even further, I know we talked before, you have a daughter and she's older now, but how did that play a role both in the way you affect your own behavior and cognition, but also your kids?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. That's a lot.
Yeah.
All right.
I'll remind you along the way.
Good.
Yeah.
So let's start with when I was super impulsive, not just talking, but physically. And I think that, my mom would tell stories of taking me to the playground and everything would, become chaotic because I just couldn't keep my hands and my mouth, my body still and out of everybody else's space. So she's like, by week 2 in the new neighborhood, parents would just see her and grab their kids and leave. And so school was more of the same. And, they actually wanted to hold me back in the first grade because I just couldn't sit still, stop talking, stop moving, constantly hands on other people. And my parents said, well, he's testing above grade average. We can't hold him back. But they were like, yeah, but socially, he's way back. And, and when you're an impulsive kid, you hear a constant barrage of negative messaging. It's nonstop because people don't know what else to do. And, they used to deal with behavior through sort of fear and punitive punishments, but by the 70s, they were just giving you information and they're trying to convince you of what they need. Joey, put that down. Joey, keep your hands to yourself. Joey, take your hands out of your desk. Joey, the pencil's sharpened. You can sit down now. It was on and on and on. If you would have recorded it, you probably would have heard in any given hour in a classroom, 95% negative corrective messages. Maybe 99.
Yeah.
And a small percentage of things about what I was doing well and how I belonged. So that's a huge takeaway for me and was one of the first lessons. So when I left school, it was with a big chip on my shoulder, and I spent 10 years working 30 different jobs to work that chip off my shoulder. I picked oranges, I sold encyclopedias, I was a personal trainer, I learned to build furniture, I had a small business.
Which speaks to the whole keeping attention is hard on any one thing at a time. And, I struggle with that. Like, I think for me, you said 30 jobs in 10 years. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
I think I've found in my life that it's hard for me to do more than a year or two of something.
Yeah.
And with Leo, we see he gets bored easily.
Oh yeah.
So like our kid who's we have 2 kids, two older boys that are, our babies. I don't know what her attention is like right now. Right. Her attention is like a baby. But our 9 and 7-year-olds, one of them, he woke up at 5:45 this morning, went out, grabbed a book, sat on the couch, and read.
Until we woke up.
I came out. Well, no, he came by to see how I was doing, and he rested with me for a little while. Then he went back and read. That's him. And you could go anywhere in the world as long as you got a book with him.
Right.
He will spend 4 or 5 hours out of your way. He loves an iPad, but he won't think about the iPad. He'll just be on his book, and then he'll go, okay, I finished my book. Leo is like the antithesis to that. He can't do anything for 30 minutes. 30 minutes is too long.
Right.
And he needs constant stimulation and constant change, which reminds me.
He's also much more physical. So even
that's true.
he started walking before Kai. He came out physical. He weaned himself at 6 months from breastfeeding. I was ready to go on. Thought it was my last baby. So I was like ready to go till age 10. Not really. But like I was like, let's do this. At 6 months, he was too busy. He was like physically distracted, wanted to watch what his big brother was doing. Like Kai would have breastfed forever. But Leo was like, I'm done. Like, I'm not going to sit here. I'm bored. Give me the bottle. Let me go. And so from the beginning, those physical symptoms were there of like very active, very stimulated by things and wanting the craving, the constant play with me thing, you know?
And the thing that I'm finding a parallel, which is why I want to focus on this for a second here, is he was physical with a lot of other kids. And so it created, which shocked us, our kid was like becoming the bully.
Right.
So that was always like he was very physical, very physical.
He started out biting kids when he was younger, and then he ended up pushing them and threatening them.
We'd be in a library and someone would be like, "Is that your kid?" I'm like, yeah. He's like, "He just had my kid in a headlock in the corner of the library and he bit him." I'm like, I have no idea where that's coming from. Like, I am so sorry. I am so sorry. And I'm going to figure this out. But like, we kept getting kicked out of Equinox Kids Club because he would hurt people and attack people.
So that's why I'm resonating with this thing you were saying, which is that your parents were like, we can't take you to the playground anymore because the other parents don't want us.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of that has calmed down for him, but I'm interested, you're talking about the personal experience. Like, what does it feel like as the kid who's being told this? And I think that's a perspective that I think is really interesting to hear. And you're talking about like 95 to 99% negative input.
That's right. Yeah. So for me, it was, I don't know where to start with that, but first of all, I think aggression is misunderstood. I think that a lot of children have a lot of aggression and it's completely natural. And we really do a poor job of addressing aggression. It's usually addressed with some sort of judgment or shame or sort of cognitive explanation about why you shouldn't have it. But they've got it and you got to deal with it. And for me, it's more about how do I think aggression in a child needs to be met with compassionate aggression. But aggression. So they need, for instance, children are not learning. We think they're learning in a way that's like cognitive. Like if we explain things, then they get it and they'll do it. They're not learning that way. They're picking up data. They're going in situation. The Latin term is in situ, which is in the situation. That's where they learn while it's happening. So, quite often, there's one is that impulsivity, you need practice regulating to get better at self-regulating. It doesn't happen because of a cognitive shift. It happens because somebody set a boundary that motivated you as a 3-year-old, as a 4-year-old to stop yourself and sit, to restrain yourself before you hit the kid next to you. These happen because they're little scientists are collecting data about what happens when things go on, and they're building models, and those models are sophisticated. So, but it's not all that information. Like all that information for me, every time I got all that negative information,
the language information,
that language about what I was doing, I already knew that. I was already having a fight in my head about those two sides.
The shaming doesn't help at all.
Exactly. It's like, it was almost like, you identifying it. I might as well have gone, you want to jump on too, huh?
Yeah, that's exactly his, that's his feeling. Victim and just like, he, since he was little, I would say, you need to control your body. You are in control of your body. And he says, I'm not in control of my body. And even his preschool, his kindergarten teacher was like, he hasn't grown in physically, like energetically, he hasn't grown into his body yet.
Right.
Which was so profound. I was like, wow. Yeah. However, I still feel in many ways that he hasn't. So it's kind of like, then we're at this point. And he says like, you're different than me. I'm not like you guys. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, he just can't explain it. He's like,
that's a very deep moment. Yeah. I mean, I kind of got chills when you said that because I feel like conflict is super important. It's a learning tool. It's going to happen. Anyone who thinks you're going to avoid conflict with your children is like they must have adopted from Mars or something, because human children are going to have conflict. And that conflict is asking an existential kind of basic question for a child, which is, I'm here. Are you here? I have power. Do you have power? Am I like you? And when the force they're pushing out isn't answered with also an equal force, I call it meet the hand. When we avoid that and we don't set a boundary, or when we just give an explanation, the answer to that question is, you're not like me. You're like this, I'm like this. And so children like that end up feeling isolated.
That definitely resonates. I mean, taking, responsibility myself as a parent, I still don't, but I definitely didn't know what to do with his energy levels, because I had already had Kai, who was such a gentle soul and spirit, physically so calm. I didn't know what to do 2 years later when Leo came out and was that wild. I didn't know what to do with it. And so I definitely met him with the same way I met Kai, which was energetically much more gentle, just hands off.
The way you feel comfortable
parenting.
Being with anybody.
With anybody, but I feel like, with the proper training, I could meet of
course. It just felt more natural.
It's not natural for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that speaks to something I've been thinking about, which is that our children are forcing us to evolve.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the reasons I'm so interested in the moments of conflict. So when I do work with parents, I choreograph and script conflict so that mom and dad can do it the same way, or if it's a single parent, that you can do it repeatedly in the same way. And what happens in that moment, what I'm scripting, is that I want you to be honoring both halves of yourself. So basic mental health, and we talked about this earlier, recognition of self, recognition of others, those things are held in a balance, tension between them. Some of us are really good at our self-recognition and getting our needs met. And other people are really good at meeting the needs of others. And there's some disbalance, and that comes from our own childhood experience, right? But if you really want to handle conflict in a profound way that teaches your child like emotional skills in the situation for life, you need to do both those things. So you might be someone who's good at setting your boundaries, but you're not good at doing it compassionate. You're going to have to grow and learn how to do that in a compassionate tone and give autonomy to the person in front of you. You might be someone who's good at recognizing the needs of the other person, but not simultaneously, asserting yours.
Yeah.
One way or the other, you're going to have to bring that into balance, to really move through these difficult children and bring them where they need to go.
Yeah.
Yeah. To me, that's the fun of Leo, actually, is, so he had this moment probably a couple of months ago now where he was acting out, and we were, we've been in this house. We were in this house. So it must have only been a month ago or so. He was really acting out, and I tried to correct, he was essentially hitting one of Sophie's friends, quote unquote, lightly hitting and play hitting, but he's strong and he doesn't realize how strong he is. So he was hurting her, and she made a comment and he kind of laughed it off and kept going. And I asked him pretty sternly, I'm like, hey, you gotta stop. This isn't fun for her anymore. You have to stop. And he looked at me and just ignored it. And I said, Leo, I need you to pay it. And I was more stern, and I had him turn to look at me, and I go, right, I need you to understand what I'm saying to you right now. That game is over. We have to move to something else. And he dismissed it. And so I did the thing that I always do, which is I send him to his room. But before he went to the room, he kind of showed me how mad he was at me that I was sending him to his room.
Stomping.
I lost it, which I don't normally lose it. I normally manage to keep it in bounds, but I didn't. And so in the room, I screamed really loudly at him. And that is, it's what sucks about it. And I don't remember that I had that much as a child growing up, but what sucks about it is when you scream that loudly, you do keep them in check because they're scared. Now you're in fear mode. So that's not functional. That's not good for the relationship, but it quote unquote works. And so I think for myself, for now, 100% in the moment. And so he had that, and then, but he lost it in the middle, and he said something that I hadn't heard him say before, which was, he said, I can't be good. I'm never good. And I stopped on a dime.
So can I give you
please.
I want to give you like how to run that scenario.
Yeah, please.
Okay. So he hits his playmate.
Actually, so again, Sophie's friend. So an adult.
An adult.
It's an adult that he
She's
said.
a playmate.
His big playmate.
Maturity wise.
So, and then in that moment, you walk up and you take Leo's hand. You say, Leo, we got to sit quietly for a minute. He goes, no, I want to play. And you say, that's okay, but we need to sit quietly for a minute. And he says, I'm sorry, I won't do it again.
Yes.
I was bad. You go, I don't think you were bad, but we do need to sit for a minute. It's not a big deal. And you sit with him and he gets upset and I know it's a drag.
Yeah.
It's a drag. But when we hit somebody, we got to sit quietly for a minute before we can go back. It's just a way to learn to control yourself. It's no big deal. Let me know when you're ready. And you sit and you wait.
Take him somewhere else though?
Same room if you like. I like to be close
we were sitting
by.
outside with about 4 or 5 people.
So just move him just outside the group and sit with him and sit quietly.
Yeah. And sit with him?
And sit with him.
Okay.
I mean, initially.
Yeah.
And eventually what you're going to be able to do is you're going to say, I need you to move and have a seat. And this is what I'm teaching parents, and schools are doing it. They did a study in Santa Barbara over the course of a year when a whole elementary school did this approach. But it's like teaching children to self-regulate. And gradually, what you're going to do is not even have to identify that behavior. He's going to hit someone and you say, oh, Leo, I need you to sit and take a break for a minute.
Yeah.
I'm not mad at you.
No, totally. No doubt that the getting mad part was me losing control, which doesn't model how he should get control, right?
Right.
Here I am losing control, telling you to get control. You're collecting data.
Right.
What you're showing me is that screaming is the way to handle this. So hitting, screaming, it's all kind of in the same ballpark, which I totally got. Yeah. And so the nice thing, and thank you, and I love that, and I can't wait for the next time that I have the opportunity to kind of, I have to be present, right? Because I have to not do the easy thing, which the easy thing in the moment, you just tell him to do what I want him to do, which is what you're saying.
Right.
That doesn't end up delivering the result. I know now through experience. I'm collecting data too. I know through experience, it doesn't deliver the result I want. So what you're saying is kind of jump forward 2 to 3 steps where you would then put in place the boundary and just jump and put in the beginning. So he recognizes when I do these things, the going and sitting, because that's I took him to a room instead of, so we're sitting in the room and he said the thing and then we sat for.
What did he say again?
He just said, I'm not good. I can't be good. I'm never good. And we sat for maybe like 15 minutes and processed. I said, what makes you say that? And he said, well, everybody always tells me that I'm bad in class and in here. and we sat down for a while, and you're right. Again, it's data, right? And so it works so much. Sorry, it's words that we're doing now, which is, it works much better in the situation for him. But I said, you're good most of the time. Most of the time, you're actually really, really good. And I don't know if I don't tell you that, but most of the time, what you're doing is great. I'm sorry that you feel like you're not good all the time, because for him, it became an absolute. And so I remember from that day, for a couple of weeks after, I made a point to point out to him, I want you to notice this moment that you're in right now and how good everything is right now. So that when we were talking the other day about I'm bad always, I just want you to pay attention how we've been here for an hour and a half, 2 hours. Nothing bad has happened.
Right.
And I just want you to start remembering, I'm pointing it out to you.
Right.
So we get to notice it together so that we don't need to have that conversation anymore. I'm never good. Because we all have, and I think I said this to him too in the moment, was we all do things that are out of turn sometimes.
Right.
All of us, adults, children, all of us. It's not about being bad or being good.
Right.
It's about learning what to do in the moments. And I feel like we've done a few things in the last month or so to kind of change and connect, for he and I to connect more and have more time. That part of it is
real
about
time of connection.
Yeah, part of it is about boundaries, but part of it is about practice of what it's like to be together in positive moments and positive experiences.
Yeah, the other thing that while you were talking that stood out is that, and I love the fact that then, you find this place to bond and to create this other identity with all of this other information and connection with him in these moments where it's harmonious and he's getting along with you and you can point that out. What I'm trying to do is to transcend good and bad with children. Yeah. Part of the reason people don't set consequences is they think you get a consequence when you're bad, or you get a reward when you're good. And it's that good and bad attachment that prevents us from setting boundaries in the first place. I would argue that in that interaction, you made 3 attempts at talking with him first because you're trying to avoid giving the thing that you give to someone when they're bad, which is a boundary. But the truth is, a boundary doesn't happen when you're bad. It happens all the time in life. And we want to shift that association with our children. So the reason we avoid it is that when boundaries were set for us, they were paired with shame, guilt, moralizing, low expectation. Okay. So we have that association and we avoid giving it to our children, but that doesn't prepare them for the world.
I actually had no boundaries when I was a kid.
Yeah, I didn't either. I had 0 boundaries.
None.
Zero.
Growing up in Israel, I don't know if a lot of people can relate listening to this, but we had no curfews. We had no deadlines. Like I said, even in class, right? I talked out of turn constantly. And the solution was just don't come to class because we can't figure out what to do with you.
Right.
So
You're just too much.
Literally, up until junior high, there would be a few periods a day,
right,
where I would go roam the halls and hang out by myself because all the other kids were in class. And at home, in Israel, the phrasing is they'll fix you in the army,
right?
Because all the kids end up going to the military at 18, right. And so you can do whatever the fuck you want until you finish high school. Because whether you start smoking weed or drinking or fighting or whatever it is, you're going to go to the military. Boundaries are tough in the military.
Right.
You act up, you go to jail. They'll come get you in a couple of weeks. You're good now? Are we ready to behave?
Right.
And if you say no, you just stay in jail. And I never had that because we left before I got to serve in the military. So my parents, and I'm totally cognizant of this, but part of the reason why throughout my life I have a hard time with conflict and boundaries,
right,
is it never existed. Every once in a while, my parents would get really mad at me, and then my mom would chase me around with a hand up. Never hit me in my life. But would chase me around the house with a hand up until she cornered me, yell at me for 35 seconds, and then it'd be done.
Right.
And that would happen once every couple of months. Other than that, it was like a free for all, and I was not an easy kid.
Right.
I lost house keys. I lost things. I was late to everything. It was not easy to have me as a kid. But there were no boundaries, so I never knew how to set them.
Right.
And I didn't have boundaries either in a different way. My mom was a single mom. She raised us and worked multiple jobs at any given time. We were home. We were latchkey kids. I was in charge. We had no boundaries ever. And I was also really good, quote unquote, for the most part. I didn't get into trouble. So my mom was just like, she's fine. So I had no boundaries.
Yeah.
And she'd say I was grounded, and then I never was.
Now, I'm curious because it seems like for me, when I hear that, I think, well, you had boundaries. They just weren't set by your mom. They were set by...
I had internal boundaries.
Yeah, because it's like there was no one there to do that for you.
There was no one there to do that, and it made me feel safe to create my own boundaries. My brother didn't turn out that way. He didn't have an internal compass in that way. So it wasn't great to parent him that way. And that's, I think, what I'm learning. And what I'm also really fearful of is I can't parent Leo the way I parent Kai.
Right.
It's not going to work.
Right.
Parenting me the way my mom parented my brother, it's not going to work. They need to be different.
Right.
Yeah.
Catered to the person, to the child.
And I think that's what you're saying is the boundary explanation, the boundary setting explanation that you just gave me was a good fit for that situation with Leo.
Right.
Kai violates boundaries too, just in different ways, and therefore needs different interventions.
Yeah, one of the big things I see is some children are very much motivated by approval.
Kai.
Yep.
And some by power.
Leo.
Yeah.
Okay. So those are entirely different dynamics. So, and in classrooms, I had a boy in a classroom. This is over in Mar Vista last year, and he was super defiant. And he was kind of they'd sent in a behaviorist, and they'd creating these crazy reward charts. And his mom's like, "It's insane. He's getting rewards for doing half as much as the other kids, and the rewards are 10 times as big, and the expectations way too low." And they did. And so the behaviorist there actually was open to training as a supervisor was. And I went in and I'd already done the program at home. And I taught her just to set up a cause and effect thing and to stop praising or censoring his behavior. Stop offering her opinion about what was right or wrong and what he should or shouldn't do. Because as soon as she offered that, he offered a defiance of it. Because he perceived it and he felt it, maybe rightly so, as an invasion of his autonomous space, of his decision-making, wanted to be independent. And so the first week, the rule was you take a break. If you don't take a break, then you take a longer break. If you don't take that, you go to the office for a longer break, you have to make up that time. So it was just a sort of way to get him to self-regulate. And then if he stayed, he wouldn't do that. He'd go home. Well, he loved going home. And
so that's a thing.
I know. So that completely didn't work at all. I mean, it worked. Like he once he figured out, I'll go home and I'll sit with mom and she'll sit with me and try and get me to do work for the rest of the day. He just started acting out. And so we switched it up a little bit and we said, okay, we're going to do, if you don't take one of these breaks, and they get bigger as you don't take them, then you accumulate what's called after school time, which just means when you get home, your mom gets this is how much time you accumulated, and you have to do this before you can get on to the other stuff in your life.
I like that.
We'll let you manage how long that is.
Sure.
And the first day I got there, he's like running around in the yard. And the kids are all in class. He's the only one out in the schoolyard. And the special needs person and the behavior say, what should we do? He's just running, around kind of taunting us. Yeah. And I said, just let him do it.
Give him the 3 hours of after school time.
That's what he got that day. That day, he accumulated 3 hours and 21 minutes of after school time.
Love it.
And actually, when he came up to me, he was like, you can't make me sit down. You can't make me go inside. And I said, you're right. I can't make you. And he's like, and I said, if you want to run, you should run. And I said, why are you just hanging around us? You got the whole place to run over. You could run over there. This is your time. I'm totally good with whatever your decision is. And he actually says, you're not fooling me with any of your reverse psychology.
How old is he?
He's second grade.
Oh my God, it's hilarious.
And so that day he goes home with 3 hours and 20 minutes. His mom keeps him in. The second day he had 2 hours. The third day he had 50 minutes. End of the week he had 10 minutes. And end of the second week, he was doing the breaks when asked. And because I was like, stop trying to get him to do things based on your approval and disapproval. Yeah. Once you pulled all that out and he could make autonomous decisions and there was a simple cause and effect structure, bang.
Because it's about power for him,
exactly.
The way it is with Leo.
So here's what I'm hearing. And I think I knew this ahead of time, but there's also a recognition as you're saying it, because the consistency of the boundaries across all the contexts is what is the key to any of that working right there.
Yes.
Because there has to be communication from the school to the home of what that time is. And then the mom, and here's the thing, right? For any parents listening right now, you know what I'm talking about right here. Sometimes parenting is really inconvenient, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's why we give up the consistency of boundaries sometimes. Because like I have work to do, or Sophie's having a photo shoot or whatever.
Right.
And Leo comes back home and let's say he's got an hour and a half of after school, sit down, read time, whatever the thing is that we said was the result of the acting out.
Yeah.
Well, that means one of us has to go monitor and manage that.
Yeah.
And I think if we're honest about it, let's just be, let's just kind of put it out there. The digital babysitting, what used to just be the TV, it's the parents taking the easy way out. A lot of the times it's like us saying, you know what? Yeah, he was bad and he needs to have a timeout, but I don't have time for this. So we'll put him in front of an iPad or we'll put him in front of the TV. And then we wonder why the kids don't do anything we want them to do, is because what we're telling them is when you act out and you're out of sorts and you're bothering me, what you get is 4 hours in front of the TV.
Yeah.
And they go, I love this. I'll bother you a little more.
Yeah.
And I'll get more TV time. And with that mom in the story that you're telling, Mar Vista, that mom, that 3 hour and 21 minutes,
she was dedicated.
She had to be there and be with her kid.
But now, step back and take the long range view. And a lot of the programs that I teach parents require, look, I'm going to say, I'm going to make your life worse for the next week. You're not going to use my methods and things are going to get better. In a lot of the cases, it's extreme. It's going to get worse for the next 5 days. You're going to look back at the month, and at the end of the month, it's going to be the best week you've ever had.
Yeah.
And then all the months after that. But you need to lay in that pattern.
Sure.
And so in this case, for instance, this was a mom who was going to the school all the time, who had, mom and dad were having to come off of work and go pick him up. So it was a continual massive amount of effort. And she put in 2 weeks of intensive effort in a very precise way. And all of a sudden she had a kid who worked in a very normal way and had adapted to school. And all of a sudden the workload was back.
This reminds me a lot of sleep training. We just transitioned Noah from 2 naps to 1. And I forgot how hard it is when you're in it.
Right.
But now she's on it. It's only been like a week and a half, 2 weeks of really just diligent, got to keep her up in the morning. Through that, maybe she sleeps for, I remember now with the boys, but it's been so long because they're 7 and 9, if they fall asleep in the car, don't let it be more than 20 minutes or they're not going to sleep.
Right.
Okay, but we got this. And just like, keeping all of us on the systems and just like, here's what we're doing now. This is the focus right now.
Right.
Let's all stay diligent on this for the greater good at the end. She will be happier. We will be happier.
Yeah.
And it's hard in the moment. It's hard even week to week. But then all of a sudden we have a great sleeper. She sleeps 12 hours at night, 3 hours during the day, period. In 2 weeks after just being diligent, all of us, and really attentive. And same thing goes for switching behavioral, the way that he expects us to respond and react and the way that we do react and respond and that relationship to conflict.
And I got a vision when you were talking. It's like I think most people are parenting as if they were going every week to the payday loan center. The payday loan center, it's like a crazy interest rate and you get in that cycle and you never get out. You're just in debt.
Yeah.
If you could step back and, make a plan so that you didn't have to go to the payday loan center for, 4 weeks, all of a sudden you'd never have to go again and things would run much different and your income would be wildly higher.
Yeah.
And in this case, it's just your joy and cooperation, but you need to put a week in with a plan. You need to put a month in with a plan. You need to get on the same page.
Exactly.
So not to, monopolize your time, but we have you on record, so there's nowhere you can go right now. But let's imagine that we've got this kid and he goes to class and he's been way better. And we've talked before about having his teacher sort of communicate in a much more direct, specific way how things went so that there is some understanding. Let's say, like, take this kid, and you don't have to obviously use very specific examples so anybody finds out who this kid is or anything, but like, take this kid, for instance. You gave the example of him running around. How is this after school time added up? Like, who are the people who are watching it?
Right.
How much time are they adding? And obviously this kind of gets customized per kid, but how much, like 3 hours and 21 minutes related to how many you're not taking the time out, space, quiet time, opportunities, how many of those kind of escalations happen in a school for 3 hours of after school attention time?
Right. So I should start by saying that was the toughest case I had in the last 2 years. So I saw probably 600 different families. I tend to go quickly through families. It's like my goal is that not that you have to see me an hour a week for a year, but that in between like 8 and 12 hours, you never have to see me again.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're all done. So I see a lot of different families. So out of the 600 odd families I've seen in the last 2 years, he was the toughest. In most cases, that's not needed at all.
Yeah.
You create a home program. It's a closed system. Even if you have 2 different homes, you have mom and dad living separately. I can create a closed system that works and motivates within that. And within a week to 3 weeks, You've got kids who'll self-regulate quickly and come down because you're giving them autonomy. You're taking away the judgment, but you've got a real clear cause and effect structure.
Okay, so instead of speaking hypothetically, let's put this into a little bit of practice for us as if as if this was a session for Leo, because we want to walk away feeling in control and that we're giving him, the best that he can have. And we don't want him to suffer through this.
Right. How old is he?
He's 7. He just turned 7 in July.
Great. Yeah. So essentially, if you'd called me, I would tell you the program that we're going to do is I'm going to talk to you and get a sense of what your main concerns and goals are.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to look at what the daily life is of sort of resources. And then we're going to set up a scripted protocol that has 2 basic parts. One is just a cause and effect structure that you can implement on a regular basis around things that he most values, that happen in a non-punitive, gradual way that he feels like he's in control of. Once we've set that up, that's the structure, assert your needs part, right? I'm going to teach you the relationship that fits inside that structure. Mm-hmm. That relationship is how you give autonomy in the moment of conflict, how you take away the moralizing. Not just don't give it, you actively take it away. He might bring a sense of he's bad right to that moment. You can take it away in the moment, in situ, right? I'm going to teach you those 2 steps. You're going to do those at home. You're going to see a big shift. He's going to poke some holes in it. We're going to patch those holes in the first week or 2. Once you have a pattern at home, I'm going to give you an edited version that they can do in a classroom that's similar to ones they've used. They used in, they did the year-long study I mentioned where they used it in every class from pre-K to 6. And they statistically showed a wildly fantastic result. They had a 50% drop school-wide in all off-task behavior. And that was from just a little bit of training.
Great.
So
amazing.
Yeah. Again, we're talking about bullying this month, and
Yep.
my sense, and we knew this, we've talked about this with another guest this month, that even his bullying was his exertion of control and power in situations. And when he feels tested, or when he feels like there's an opening, to be honest, he'll take advantage of it. Right. Like, which is kind of just human nature to some extent. We all look for those gaps in different places.
Right.
But as a kid, I remember one of the things that happened is he threatened a kid. He told him that one of my friends was a cop and he was going to go kill his dad or something, which sounded insane to me. Where would this even come up? First of all, none of my friends are cops.
Right.
Secondly, the notion of that threatening is just insane to me. And our reaction was that. It was kind of like this shocked reaction at first. But what I'm getting from the perspective that you're mentioning right now is in taking away the judgment, there's an opportunity to say, when we talk like that, when we end up threatening kids, it's time to pull back, and we just need a little quiet time. That's just, and almost showing him in the moment, kind of, we don't do this, right? And because after this last one of the conversation with Jody that we had, I did adjust the bullying internal perception that I have from trying to hurt other people to trying to control and sort of get under wraps your own world somehow. And that takes a little effort, because there is a lot of judgment around bullying, no doubt. And we had it for our kid, right? Because we're not bullies. We didn't want our kid to grow up to be a bully. So it was scary.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about where bullying comes from. And honestly, a lot of harsh judgment on those children who resort to bullying or become bullies. And I think that, first of all, bullying is a cry for social power. There was a really interesting research study. They talk about it in a book called Nurture Shock. It came out about 12 years ago, but brilliant book. And in the study, what they did is they showed preschoolers, or they measured what kind of media preschoolers were watching, and they divided them into 3 groups. The main group watched an assortment, but they took the 500 that watched the most aggressive, physically aggressive media, and they compared them to the 500 who watched the most pro-social media. So, on the aggressive side, you had Star Wars and Power Rangers and fighting and swords, and on the other side, you had Arthur and that big red dog. I forgot it. Clifford, thank you. And and things with a moral lesson. And they measured 3 kinds of aggression. They measured physical aggression, verbal aggression, and social aggression. So social aggression is don't play with her. I don't like her, or she's got a stupid hat on, and and we should make fun of her. So there's, then there's name calling, physical aggression. And what they found is that predictably, the group that watched the most physically aggressive stuff were slightly more physically aggressive than the rest of the group. But the group that watched the pro-social media were more aggressive in all 3 areas. Pro-social media, trying to teach a moral lesson. And those kids were the most bullying, coercive, and manipulative in the classroom.
Wow. Didn't think you were going that direction. Because I was even thinking shit. All he watched was Daniel Tiger. He never watched he loved princesses and Daniel Tiger, which was all. Daniel Tiger makes me cry. It's so morally incredible, being a good person. He didn't watch anything violent. We weren't hitting him. I'm where's he going with this? Oh, of course he's going to the obvious direction.
No,
and you're not.
It's the opposite.
Tell us more.
So what they did is they stood back because they had the same reaction you did. Was what is this? And there were strong correlations. They were stronger than the ones with the aggressive group on the other end.
Amazing.
And what they saw is that to tell a story, you have to make a story arc. And a story arc looks like this: bad behavior, bad behavior, bad behavior, problem, conflict, moral realization, one example of a good behavior. And what children pulled from that was tools for social power. That was their motivation.
Wow.
They didn't see bad, big idea, good. They saw saw, hammer, sander, planer. These are, I'll take them all. Now I have all kinds of tools for social power. That's what motivates. They're drawing moral conclusions based on what happens. Okay. So if we're giving them data that brings them to a place where they have no social power unless they're a bully, who's to blame?
Yeah.
So that's for me, it's a cry for social power. And the other thing is that it can lead to an identity in that classroom based on social power. And,
which is where it was going for him in kindergarten, which was what was so troubling about it. That story you were telling in the beginning about the other parents kind of pulling their kids away. It didn't get that bad for sure, but his teacher was kind of like, hey, this can't keep going on.
He changed his technique also, with his reaction, the way that he interacted with Leo, he shifted. And he was teaching him the way he taught all his kindergartners. And he's very compassionate, for sure, and has boundaries. But he just started teaching him differently and having a different relationship with him. And it actually ended on a really good note last year.
If we flip it for a second, what about, given this perspective, what about the parents or the kids who are being bullied? If we understand it from the kid who is bullying is trying to exert their social control and they found tools for it. Obviously, the parents of the kid who's doing the bullying have some work to do, and the teachers that are teaching that kid. Is there anything else that they can do from the other side?
Well, I think from the other side, you have to realize that, it's not just because your kid is motivated by approval and disapproval doesn't make them the good kid in the class and not the bad kid. They're all struggling for the same thing. They want social power. Some kids are successful at doing that in the cooperative, get your approval kind of way. But what it does also speak to is, I think that there's an importance to having cause and effect consequences. Consequences are a bad thing when they're paired with judgment and moralizing, but we need children to have consequences to learn from. There's just as much damage to the child who buys into that approval, disapproval in that classroom, who's getting bullied, but bought into that system psychologically, in their long range as it is to the child who didn't buy into that, who wanted power. Because the first one is then being held to, is going to try and be perfectionist, is going to have their self-esteem and self-worth always be in the balance of what other people think and believe.
Sure.
And I'll see parents that they bring me in for the 5-year-old who's like Darth Vader, but the other one is such a perfectionist and is so nailed down social power by approval that they've become neurotic about it.
Yeah.
And they can't make their own decisions and they're worried.
Yeah.
You got to liberate that one.
Yeah.
This program of setting boundaries, it's a way. In a kindergarten yesterday, they did a whole lesson on write down a picture of a moment when you made a mistake and learned something. So cognitively, we know we need to teach us to, but we're super hesitant to actually let them make a mistake and learn from it. Yeah. Which is what a break is. You say, I need you to take a break for a minute. This is a learning moment. You actually have to experience it. You know.
I love it. Okay, I feel like we could talk about this for 3 hours,
Yes.
and we probably will.
We're gonna have you back.
All right.
But we have, this has been really, really informative. And we have 5 questions that we ask all of our guests.
Great.
And people have told us they love these. So we'll go there.
All right.
All right. 5 questions. The first question is, what is the best advice you've ever received?
Wow. Well, it was the thing that comes to mind, honestly, it's just somebody reframed my life. It was up until about the 9th or 10th grade, I just was always the kid who couldn't get anything done, who didn't deserve, because I didn't deserve success and wasn't going to be successful, and because I was all over the place. And one day my wrestling coach turned to me and he said, you know what? I think you're a Renaissance man. And and just that little reshaping of like, you're not broken for liking 20 different things. That's a kind of person. That's a beautiful person. It meant a lot to me, and it was something I held onto for a long time.
I love it. That's beautiful. Out of all the stuff you've done, all the work, all the different jobs and everything else you've done, what has been your proudest moment to date?
It was the moment that led to writing the book. I'd been working with extreme behavior problem kids for years, and they brought me in for a girl who was 8 years old, and she'd been medicated and given multiple diagnoses, and she was getting worse. And it was a school for kids who had already been thrown out. So they were looking at putting her in a residential treatment center. Oof. She was 8. I mean, the advocate for her mother's advocate said, you need to consider sending her to a residential permanent place because she's going to tear your house apart. And that was where, during that case, a couple of things happened. One is that I organized a group of people to do what I had used to do singularly, to do the same thing. And I did my first scripts. And in about 10 weeks, we turned the whole corner on that and stopped the violent behavior. And at the end of a year, she was back in a regular public school, and she graduated college a couple years ago. And for me, it was also I had a realization in the middle of that of what psychologically was causing what I'd seen. Up until then, it was all intuitive. I was just doing what I knew intuitively I needed to, but didn't get. So it's just like a conversation with myself that was partly unconscious.
Yeah.
And then in this case, it all came to the surface, and I had the intellectual realization. And at that point, at the end of that, I also realized, oh no, I have to write a book. So.
Wow, that's cool. I love, there's nothing like changing the life of a human being, right?
Yeah.
There's nothing like that. And that's what I love about my work too. That's awesome.
What has been your hardest moment?
I had to switch from simply doing the work intuitively, giving people what I need, to dealing with my actual relationships with other people. Not just, it's easy for me to treat a child with compassion. It was much harder to treat myself and other adults with compassion and respect. So, when they made I mean, now I struggle with it because, I'm working with my daughter and she's helping me write. And you work with your daughter, your issues come up.
Yeah.
You press each other's buttons.
Totally.
And I started to realize this is the work. This interpersonal work of getting through that and learning what I actually project out to people and all my issues that I still carry. That's the hard work. It's like the hardest client I ever had. If somebody said the hardest, well, that's me.
Yeah.
And
it's also the forest trees thing, right? Is so much easier to see the issues in somebody else and then pick tools to fix them.
That's right.
But we are so limited by our own perspective, and so, I mean, every time that Sophie and I have a fight, I feel like it's primarily because I'm stuck in my perspective and she's stuck in hers. And we're just like looking for each other in the dark somewhere. Like, where are you exactly? So I can find you because I'm not seeing the same world you're seeing.
Yeah.
And that's tough.
And I ultimately realized, and I only realized this lately, that actually to take my work really to a whole nother level, I have to do that work every day. I'm asking people to do work. If I'm not doing it, and I got plenty to do.
Yeah.
It's an endless, till the end of time
if
process.
I'm not in the process of doing that work, something's not going to ring true.
We say that every day.
Well,
it's, for relationships, but it's same with self. You have to be doing the work. If it's about a relationship, the relationship has to be doing work. Each individual has to be doing work. It's ongoing. It's not a bad thing. It's beautiful.
Yeah. Speaking of that, as you figure that out, how do you do the self-care? What do you now do in your day-to-day to make sure that you're showing up as best as you can?
Well, a couple things. I mean, I've been a Buddhist since I was 19, and that's really a practice of self-reflection and trying to speak to sort of what is eternal and bigger than me, but also that I'm part of, and to be able to see that in the people around me. So I read Ralph Waldo Emerson in the sauna all the time.
Wow.
Surfing clears my head on a almost daily basis. I like Barry Michaels, who wrote a book called The Tools. And I feel like he's been a mentor and a guide in terms of, I've always been a believer in, you need to be doing self-work and you need to figure out other people to do that with. And you need to keep searching until you find the one that clicks for you.
Love that.
That's great.
Thank you. This podcast is called Ignited. What ignites you?
Honestly, my favorite thing is the work. Like to have a conversation with somebody in Australia or Toronto and to see them, kind of feel like they have hope for their kids and they feel a different perspective, or get an email from somebody that says, I read your book and everything has shifted. And that's the most powerful thing. I do a lot of different things. I roast coffee, I surf, I build stuff.
Yeah.
There's lots of things I do that are fun, but what ignites me is the work.
Yeah. That transformation. Awesome. That's how we are too.
Yeah.
And this conversation, I have to say, this was ignited.
Yeah.
I thought it was, just sort of a catchy word, but I feel like there's a fire in the room, and that we built, in the last hour.
That's beautiful.
And I'm really grateful.
Thanks for saying that. Which one of you was that? Was that you, Simone, that asked how I feel after a podcast? Yeah. She was like, are you drained after a podcast? I'm like, no, I am ignited. I am on fire. I am alive after every podcast. Like I could do this all day.
Yeah. I mean, that's the reason we actually started these. We found ourselves having really deep, really amazing, powerful conversations with people in the real world regularly. And I was like, I don't like small talk. I'm not good at small talk.
No, I've
always sucked at it. I like getting so deep to the core that we all connect, like we did in the question just now, to what really matters to us.
Yeah.
Because my belief, and I mean, you're even talking about kids, my belief is that when we help people find that kernel, that's it. You can handle everything in life once you find that thing.
Right.
Because the toughest moments, the most exciting moments, the most mundane moments, they all get leveled up by how connected you are to the purpose and the fire that burns inside you. And so thank you for saying that. That's what we love about doing this.
Absolutely.
And for the rest of you, obviously we'll have all of Joe's contacts and websites and book. I hear there potentially might be a second book.
Second book's on the way. We're submitting the proposal And the first sample chapter's 10 days from now. So
Awesome.
Amazing.
Congrats.
Well, we'll follow
thank
that
you.
as well. Thank you so
for
much
your
for
work.
joining us. Thank you for your work. See you all next week, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody, for listening to the Ignited podcast. We were so happy to have you along for this ride. Please go and subscribe to this. Leave us a review. We love hearing from you. And if you want more, don't forget to go to ignited.com, where all the podcast episodes are available with show notes and so many of the little details and links from each one of these interviews. And you can look at all the future events that we have going on, all the things that make Ignited so special, even beyond this recording. Again, thank you so much for joining us. We will see you next week.